The streets of ancient Pataliputra were alive with the hum of a bustling empire. Merchants hawked their wares beneath flickering torchlight, the scent of spices and incense mingling in the warm night air. But beneath the surface, a silent war was unfolding, a war of information, where whispers could topple kings and rumors could kill more effectively than swords. Among the crowds walked figures who seemed ordinary, a humble monk, a traveling merchant, a servant carrying water. Yet, behind their ordinary masks, they were anything but common. They were the eyes and ears of the Mauryan Empire, the hidden agents of one of the first and most sophisticated spy networks the world had ever seen. These men and women wielded secrets as weapons, shaping the fate of nations from the shadows. Before we dive deeper into this untold story, take a moment to connect with our growing community of history seekers and truth hunters. Tell us in the comments where you're rewatching from and what time it is there right now. As always, incredible to see viewers from every corner of the world coming together for these ancient mysteries. And if you love uncovering the hidden side of history, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Ancient Spy Files so you never miss an episode. Your support helps us keep shining a light on these forgotten stories of intrigue and power. Centuries before the rise of Rome or the Mongol Empire, long before modern intelligence agencies like the CIA or MI6 existed, there was a kingdom in ancient India that understood a profound truth. Empires are not built by armies alone. They are built by knowledge of enemies, allies, and even one's own people. In the 4th century BCE, the Mauryan Empire emerged as one of the greatest powers of the ancient world. Under the visionary leadership of Chandragupta Maurya, it united vast territories that had previously been fractured into warring kingdoms. But this unification didn't happen through brute strength alone. It was achieved through strategy, manipulation, and an invisible army of spies. At the heart of this invisible war was a single man, Chanakya, also known as Kautilya, the legendary strategist and philosopher who authored the Arthashastra, a treatise that remains one of the most advanced political and military manuals ever written. Chanakya understood that rulers must see everything, hear everything, and act before threats even materialized. He designed a network of spies that infiltrated every level of society, from royal palaces to village marketplaces, ensuring that no secret remained hidden from the emperor. This was not espionage as we think of it today, with satellites and cyber warfare. It was espionage at its rawest and most dangerous, carried out face to face, with nothing but human cunning and deception. These ancient spies risked their lives every day, operating in a world where discovery meant brutal execution. And yet, through their sacrifices, the Mauryan Empire grew stronger, outmaneuvering rivals and crushing rebellions before they could even begin. The origins of this network can be traced to a time of chaos. Before Chandragupta's rise, northern India was a patchwork of competing kingdoms, each scheming against the others. Foreign powers, including remnants of Alexander the Great's armies, hovered at the borders, eager to exploit the region's instability. In this fractured landscape, open warfare was constant, but it was also costly and unpredictable. Chanakya, a brilliant scholar and political mastermind, saw a different path. Why fight endless battles in the open when you could control events from the shadows? Chanakya's philosophy was simple but revolutionary. The most efficient way to defeat an enemy is to destroy their will to fight before the battle even begins. To do this, he needed information, and to gather that information, he needed spies. But not just any spies. He envisioned a system where agents would be embedded so deeply within enemy societies that they could influence events at the highest levels. These weren't mere informants. They were puppet masters, pulling the strings of kings and generals without ever revealing their true identities. To build this network, Chanakya drew from all walks of life. Merchants were particularly valuable as they could travel freely between kingdoms, asking questions under the guise of trade. Monks and ascetics were also ideal, since their spiritual status allowed them access to places and conversations that were off limits to ordinary citizens. Even entertainers, such as dancers and musicians, were recruited, as their performances granted them entry to royal courts, where they could overhear crucial conversations. In some cases, women were trained as spies, using their positions within palaces to gather secrets that men could never access. This diversity made the network nearly impossible to detect, as spies could be hiding anywhere, in anyone. Chanakya's brilliance lay not just in recruiting spies, but in structuring the network to maximize its effectiveness. Each agent operated within a carefully designed hierarchy. Field operatives reported to handlers, who in turn reported to regional coordinators. Only the highest-ranking members had a complete picture of the network's scope. This compartmentalization ensured that if one spy was captured, they could not expose the entire system. Messages were encoded using ingenious methods. Sometimes they were hidden in hollowed-out objects, like bamboo tubes, or disguised within religious texts. Other times, messages were delivered orally, using code words and memorized scripts. One particularly creative method involved using trained pigeons to carry messages across vast distances, an early form of aerial communication. These techniques allowed information to flow rapidly and securely, giving the Mauryan rulers a near-constant stream of intelligence about enemy movements, political plots, and even natural disasters that could affect the stability of the realm. The network also relied heavily on psychological manipulation. Chanakya understood that raw information was not enough. It had to be weaponized. Spies were tasked not only with gathering intelligence, but with shaping perceptions. They spread rumors to destabilize rival kingdoms, planted false evidence to turn allies into enemies, and carefully crafted narratives that guided public opinion. In many cases, an enemy city would crumble from within before the Mauryan army even arrived, its leaders paralyzed by mistrust and fear. As Chandragupta Maurya consolidated his power, the spy network became an extension of his own will. Though he ruled from the magnificent capital of Pataliputra, his influence reached into the most distant corners of the empire through the eyes and ears of his agents. A rebellion brewing hundreds of miles away might be quashed before it ever reached the point of open conflict, simply because a spy embedded in the rebel group had reported its plans in advance. This level of control gave Chandragupta a godlike presence in the minds of his subjects. People began to believe that the emperor knew everything, saw everything, and could strike at any moment. In truth, it was the network of spies that created this illusion of omnipotence. Fear of the invisible was more powerful than any army. One famous account tells of a nobleman who plotted to assassinate Chandragupta. The plan was flawless, or so he thought. But on the very night he prepared to act, imperial guards stormed his house and arrested him, before he had even voiced his intentions to anyone. How did the emperor know? The answer was simple. There had been a spy among the nobleman's servants the entire time, listening and reporting every detail. This story spread like wildfire, deterring countless others from even considering rebellion. The Mauryan spies did not operate only within their own empire. They were also active in neighboring kingdoms, gathering intelligence about foreign rulers and military movements. Some spies lived undercover in enemy territories for years, slowly climbing the ranks of foreign governments or armies. In this way, the Mauryans could influence external politics to their advantage. A rival kingdom might find itself suddenly embroiled in civil war, a conflict secretly instigated by Mauryan agents. One of the most dramatic examples of this strategy involved remnants of Alexander the Great's empire. After Alexander's death, his generals divided his vast territories among themselves, creating a network of Hellenistic states that often clashed with one another. The Mauryan spies exploited these rivalries, feeding misinformation to keep the Greek states divided and distracted. By the time Chandragupta's armies moved westward, his enemies were too busy fighting each other to mount a coordinated defense. It was a masterstroke of geopolitical manipulation, achieved not through direct confrontation, but through whispers and lies. While the spy network was undeniably effective, it also raised profound ethical questions. Chanakya himself wrestled with the moral implications of his work. In his writings, he argued that the stability of the state justified almost any action, including deception and assassination. A ruler, he wrote, must sometimes act in ways that seem cruel, for the sake of the greater good. To the Mauryan rulers, the spies were heroes, protectors of the realm. But to those who lived under constant surveillance, they were a source of fear and paranoia. No one could be certain who to trust. A friend, a neighbor, even a family member might secretly be an agent of the emperor. This culture of suspicion created a society where rebellion was nearly impossible, but it also bred resentment that would simmer for generations. As we conclude this first chapter, it's important to recognize just how revolutionary this system was. The Mauryan spy network wasn't just a tool of its time. It was the prototype for every intelligence agency that followed. The principles Chanakya developed, compartmentalization, psychological warfare, disinformation, are still used by modern spy organizations today. In many ways, when we speak of espionage in the modern world, we are echoing techniques first perfected over 2,000 years ago. But the story of these ancient spies is far from over. In the next chapter, we will step deeper into their world, exploring the secret training methods, the incredible disguises, and the legendary missions that define this network. We will meet the men and women who risked everything to serve the Emperor's vision, and we will uncover the dark truths behind their success. For now, consider this. While history remembers the great battles and mighty rulers, it is often the invisible forces, the whispers in the dark, that truly shape the destiny of civilizations. And nowhere is that truer than in the shadowed streets of ancient India, where an empire was built not just on swords and elephants, but on secrets. In the dimly lit corridors of the Mauryan capital, Pataliputra, secrets were currency, and the most valuable coins were whispers carried by unseen mouths. To the common people, the city was a place of grandeur, marble palaces, lush gardens, and bustling markets alive with the colors and sounds of an empire at its peak. But beneath this surface beauty existed another city, hidden in plain sight, a city of shadows where spies moved silently, blending among monks, merchants, and beggars. Here, deception was not just a skill, it was a way of life. Chanakya, the mastermind behind this network, knew that spies could not simply be recruited and sent into the world. They had to be forged, shaped into instruments of absolute precision. A single mistake could mean not just the death of the spy, but the unraveling of an entire operation. And so, within the heart of the capital, secret facilities were established, places known only to the emperor and a handful of trusted advisors. These were not training grounds in the traditional sense. There were no flags, no parades, no fanfare. They were quiet, anonymous structures, indistinguishable from temples or warehouses, where men and women were stripped of their former lives and rebuilt as tools of the state. The first lesson every recruit learned was to disappear in plain sight. A spy who looked like a spy was already a dead man walking. Chanakya taught them to become anyone, to wear identities like garments. One day, a trainee might be dressed as a humble farmer, hands calloused and posture bent. The next, they would be adorned in the silks of a nobleman, speaking with the confidence of one born to privilege. Disguise went far beyond clothing. It required mastery of voice, gesture, and thought. A spy pretending to be a merchant had to know not just the prices of goods, but the rhythms of trade, the slang of caravan routes, the subtle signals exchanged between buyers and sellers. An assassin posing as a monk had to embody serenity, walking and speaking with the calm authority of the devout. Even the way they breathed was rehearsed until it became second nature. Chanakya believed that the most dangerous enemy was predictability. His spies learned to abandon habits, to erase personal quirks that might give them away. In time, they became ghosts, men and women who no longer had a single true identity, only the shifting masks they wore. To maintain control over such a vast network, Chanakya divided his spies into 5 specialized branches, each with its own purpose. These divisions were known collectively as the 5 Shadows, a system so advanced that echoes of it can still be seen in modern intelligence agencies. The Watchers, masters of observation and infiltration. They embedded themselves in enemy cities, markets, and courts, gathering intelligence without interfering directly. The Whisperers, experts in spreading disinformation. They seeded rumors that could spark paranoia, uprisings, or even civil wars. The Hands of Justice, silent enforcers, tasked with eliminating traitors, enemy agents, or targets whose survival threatened the empire. The Shadows of the Road, mobile operatives who traveled disguised as traders or pilgrims, carrying messages across the empire with astonishing speed and secrecy. The Ghosts, the most mysterious of all, these agents operated independently, answering only to Chanakya himself. Their missions were known to no one else, and their identities were erased even from official records. This system allowed the Mauryan spies to operate with terrifying efficiency. Each branch knew only its own tasks, never the full scope of the network. If one group was compromised, the others remained intact. It was an ancient form of compartmentalization, centuries ahead of its time. The training process was grueling, not just physically but psychologically. Trainees were taught to lie so convincingly that they could fool even themselves. Exercises involved infiltrating simulated villages filled with other spies posing as civilians. The recruits had to gather intelligence without being detected, using every trick of charm, intimidation, and deception. Failure was not punished with death, not yet. Instead, it was met with something worse: erasure. A failed spy's name was struck from the records, their existence officially denied. They became nothing, a warning to others of what awaited those who faltered. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of training was the final test, known only as the Night of Masks. Recruits were blindfolded and taken to an undisclosed location. There, they were given a mission: infiltrate a heavily guarded compound and retrieve a hidden scroll. Unknown to them, half of the guards were fellow trainees, and half were real Imperial soldiers who believed they were defending the Emperor's treasure. A single mistake could mean real death. Those who succeeded emerged as full-fledged operatives. Those who failed vanished, their stories swallowed by the darkness. As the network grew, stories began to circulate of missions so audacious they seemed like myths. One such tale spoke of a spy named Vishaka, a woman trained as a court entertainer. She was sent to the rival kingdom of Kalinga, where she used her charm and wit to gain the trust of the royal family. Over years of careful manipulation, she became a trusted confidant of the queen. When war finally loomed between Kalinga and the Mauryan Empire, Vishaka planted subtle lies that turned the queen against her own generals. By the time the Mauryan army marched, Kalinga was already in chaos. The city surrendered without a single siege weapon being fired. To the public, it seemed like a miracle. To Chanakya, it was simply another victory won in the shadows. Another mission involved a group of whisperers who infiltrated a rebellious province. Rather than confronting the rebels directly, they spread rumors of betrayal among their ranks. Secret messages were accidentally intercepted, suggesting that the rebel leaders were plotting against each other. Within weeks, the rebellion collapsed into infighting, and the Mauryan forces entered unopposed. No blood was spilled, no battles fought, only words, carefully chosen and perfectly timed. But such victories came at a cost. The very secrecy that made the network powerful also made it fragile. Spies were forbidden from forming attachments or speaking of their work. Many lived under false identities for so long that they lost all sense of self. Some began to question their loyalty, wondering whether the empire they served truly deserved such sacrifice. A few even turned traitors, selling secrets to foreign powers in exchange for wealth or freedom. Chanakya anticipated this and built layers of surveillance within the network itself. Spies were assigned to monitor other spies, creating a web of mutual suspicion. Betrayal was punished swiftly and publicly. Captured traitors were paraded through the streets before vanishing forever into the darkness. This culture of fear kept the network functioning, but it also planted seeds of paranoia that would one day threaten to destroy it from within. To the outside world, Chandragupta Maurya appeared to be a ruler of almost supernatural foresight. He seemed to know his enemies' plans before they were even conceived. Cities surrendered without resistance, rebellions dissolved before they began, and rival kingdoms fell into chaos without the Mauryan army lifting a sword. This illusion of omniscience was carefully cultivated by Chanakya's network. When foreign diplomats visited the capital, they were subtly guided through areas where spies whispered false information, just loudly enough to be overheard. When rebellions were quashed, the emperor made sure the punishments were dramatic and public, reinforcing the belief that resistance was hopeless. Fear itself became a weapon, wielded with precision and skill. This strategy extended beyond the empire's borders. Spies in distant lands spread tales of Mauryan invincibility, inflating the size of its armies and the reach of its power. In some cases, foreign rulers chose to become allies or vassals, simply to avoid provoking a war they believed they could never win. The Mauryan Empire expanded not just through conquest, but through the careful management of perception, a concept as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. By the height of Chandragupta's reign, the spy network had become a state within a state. It operated independently of the military, the courts, and even the emperor himself. Chanakya alone held the threads, weaving them into a tapestry of deception that stretched across the known world. And yet, for all its power, the network remained invisible. The common people never saw the spies who shaped their lives. They saw only the outcomes: a rebellion crushed before it began, a foreign enemy mysteriously weakened, a ruler who seemed untouchable. In their minds, these events were acts of fate or divine will. Only a few understood the truth that behind every miracle was a carefully calculated series of actions, carried out by men and women whose names would never be known. But even as the network reached its zenith, dangers were brewing. Neighboring kingdoms, once ignorant of the Mauryan methods, began to develop spy systems of their own. Foreign agents infiltrated the empire, turning Chanakya's techniques against him. At the same time, internal factions within the network grew restless. Some questioned whether Chanakya's vision truly served the emperor, or whether the spy master had become too powerful to be trusted. In the next chapter, we will step into this rising storm. Betrayals will come to light, and the very system that held the empire together will begin to fracture. For while spies can control the world from the shadows, they cannot escape the darkness they create. And when shadows fight shadows, even the brightest empire can fall. The night air in Pataliputra was thick with unease. The bustling capital of the Mauryan Empire was still a city of splendor, its palaces gleaming beneath the torchlight, its markets overflowing with goods from across the known world. Yet beneath the opulence, a silent tension coiled like a snake ready to strike. The spy network that had once made Chandragupta's empire untouchable was beginning to fracture. For the first time, the whispers that had always served the emperor now carried notes of dissent and rebellion. Chanakya had always believed his system to be unbreakable. It was built on secrecy, compartmentalization, and fear. Each branch of the five shadows operated independently, with no knowledge of the other's missions. A captured spy could never compromise the entire network. But this strength was also a weakness. If one branch turned rogue, there would be no warning until the damage was done. And now, Chanakya was beginning to see the signs, subtle, scattered anomalies that only a master of intrigue would notice. Reports began arriving late, or not at all. Missions that had always run smoothly started to falter. Some spies returned from assignments with inconsistent stories, their eyes betraying a guilt they dared not speak. Chanakya's instincts screamed at him. Someone was playing a dangerous game, perhaps several others. But was it an external enemy, or had rot set in within his own creation? For years, the Mauryan Empire had enjoyed a monopoly on espionage. Their methods were so advanced, their reach so vast, that rival kingdoms were powerless to resist. But empires breed envy, and envy breeds imitation. Foreign rulers, humiliated by their repeated defeats, began to study the Mauryan techniques. They sent emissaries disguised as traders and scholars, who observed carefully and carried their findings home. Over time, neighboring states began to develop spy networks of their own, crude at first, but growing steadily more sophisticated. The greatest threat came from the remnants of Alexander the Great's empire in the west. These Hellenistic states were fractured, but they were also cunning. Greek tacticians had long valued strategy and deception, and now they turned their brilliance toward countering the Mauryan system. They began planting double agents, men and women, who pretended loyalty to the Mauryan cause while secretly serving foreign masters. These infiltrators fed false information back to Chanakya, leading his forces into traps and wasting resources on phantom threats. One infamous incident nearly shattered the empire's western frontier. A high-ranking watcher reported that a neighboring king was preparing to invade with a massive army. Mauryan forces mobilized, marching hundreds of miles to intercept the threat, only to find empty plains. While the emperor's soldiers were distracted, a real enemy force struck elsewhere, seizing several key outposts. The mastermind behind this deception was never caught. To this day, historians debate whether he was a foreign agent or a traitor from within. Even as foreign spies crept into the network, internal tensions were growing. The Five Shadows had been designed to serve a single purpose: the protection and expansion of the Mauryan Empire. But as the years passed, some branches began to develop their own identities and agendas. The Whisperers, who specialized in psychological warfare, grew especially ambitious. Their work required them to manipulate not just enemies, but sometimes their own people. Over time, they began to see themselves not as servants of the state, but as the true architects of the empire's stability. Why should Chandragupta rule, they whispered among themselves, when it was their lies and schemes that held the realm together? The hands of justice, meanwhile, became consumed by their role as enforcers. Originally tasked with eliminating external threats, they increasingly turned their blades inward, hunting down suspected traitors with ruthless efficiency. Some began to relish their power, using their authority to settle personal vendettas or intimidate rivals. Fear, once a tool to protect the empire, now threatened to tear it apart. Chanakya, ever vigilant, noticed these shifts. He tightened his grip, placing spies to monitor other spies, but this only deepened the paranoia. Agents began questioning one another, wondering who was truly loyal and who was secretly reporting to the master strategist. A culture of suspicion took root, spreading like poison through the network. The breaking point came with the betrayal of a ghost, one of the most elite and secretive operatives in Chanakya's entire system. The ghosts were chosen for their absolute loyalty, their willingness to vanish completely into the service of the state. Their identities were erased, their pasts destroyed. To become a ghost was to cease to exist as an individual and become a living tool of espionage. One such agent, known only by the codename Ashva, had served the empire for years without question. His missions were legendary, infiltrating enemy courts, staging assassinations that looked like accidents, even toppling a minor kingdom through a single whispered lie. To Chanakya, Ashva was the perfect weapon. But perfection breeds arrogance. Unbeknownst to his master, Ashva had begun to question the very system he served. Was the empire truly just, or was it simply another form of tyranny, enforced by invisible chains? These doubts festered until, during a mission beyond the empire's borders, Ashva was approached by foreign agents. They offered him something the Mauryan network never could: freedom. All they asked in return was information, a small betrayal, easily concealed. Ashva agreed. His first act of treachery was subtle, almost undetectable. A single piece of misinformation planted here, a delayed report there. But over time, his actions grew bolder. Entire operations collapsed because of his manipulations. Dozens of loyal spies were captured or killed, their missions compromised by a man they trusted completely. When Chanakya finally discovered the betrayal, it was too late. Ashva had vanished, disappearing into the vast lands beyond the empire. His name became a curse among the Five Shadows, a reminder that even the most carefully controlled system could be undone by a single crack. The betrayal of Ashva shook the Mauryan leadership to its core. Chandragupta himself, once seen as an almost divine figure, now appeared vulnerable. If even his most trusted agents could turn against him, what hope did he have of controlling the vast empire? To reassert his authority, Chandragupta staged a dramatic display of power. In the central square of Pataliputra, dozens of captured traitors, both foreign spies and internal defectors, were paraded before the populace. Their crimes were read aloud, their confessions extracted through methods best left to the imagination. Then, in a chilling spectacle, they were executed as a warning to all. The message was clear: the emperor still saw all, knew all, and would tolerate no disobedience. But while this display impressed the common people, it had a more complicated effect on the spy network itself. Some agents were reassured, their loyalty renewed by the emperor's decisive action. Others, however, saw it as a sign of weakness. If Chandragupta had to prove his omnipotence, perhaps he was not truly omnipotent at all. In the shadows, whispers of rebellion grew louder. In response to these growing threats, Chanakya initiated the most ambitious counterintelligence campaign in the empire's history. He turned the network inward, using its vast resources to root out disloyalty. Spies were reassigned, handlers replaced, entire branches restructured overnight. No one knew who to trust. In one particularly cunning move, Chanakya spread false rumors of his own death, observing carefully to see which agents moved against the state in the ensuing chaos. Those who revealed their true colors were swiftly eliminated. The operation was a success, but it came at a terrible cost. By pitting spies against spies, Chanakya had ensured short-term stability, but he had also deepened the divisions within his organization. The five shadows were now a network held together not by loyalty, but by fear. As the chapter closes, the Mauryan Empire stands on a knife's edge. Externally, it remains a vast and powerful force, respected and feared across the known world. But internally, its foundations are cracking. Foreign agents are growing bolder, slipping past even the most vigilant defenses. Internal factions are plotting in secret, their ambitions hidden behind layers of lies. Chanakya himself is haunted by doubts. He has built a machine of unparalleled complexity, but he no longer fully controls it. The very tools he created to protect the empire may now be the instruments of its downfall. Chandragupta, meanwhile, faces his own crisis of faith. Can an emperor rule a realm built entirely on deception? Or is he merely a figurehead, dancing on strings pulled by unseen hands? In the final chapter, the storm will break. Betrayals will come to light. The true enemy will reveal itself, and the fate of the Mauryan spy network will be decided. But as history has shown, when shadows fight shadows, there are no true victors, only survivors. The storm that Chanakya had long feared finally descended upon the Mauryan Empire. It began, as all great downfalls do, not with open rebellion, but with whispers in the dark. Across the empire, conflicting reports flooded in. Enemy forces massing on the western frontier, rebellion stirring in the southern provinces, secret plots forming within the royal court itself. But were these threats real, or carefully crafted illusions planted by foreign spies? The once fluid network of information was now a tangled web, with truth and lies indistinguishable. Even Chanakya, the master of manipulation, found himself blind, unable to separate reality from deception. For the first time, the empire's invisible army was not protecting it. It was paralyzing it. The very weapon that had built the Mauryan dynasty was now turning inward, slicing at its own foundation. As chaos spread, foreign enemies seized their moment. Among them were the Greek states to the west, remnants of Alexander the Great's fractured empire. For years they had studied Chanakya's methods, slowly building their own network of counter-spies and double agents. Now they moved with precision, planting operatives within every level of the Mauryan intelligence system. Their greatest weapon was not armies or swords, but disinformation. Fake messages were intercepted accidentally, suggesting uprisings that didn't exist or armies that weren't really marching. Entire Mauryan legions were sent chasing phantoms, leaving vital regions unguarded. One particularly devastating ploy involved the city of Takshashila, a crucial hub on the empire's northwestern frontier. Reports claimed the city was on the verge of rebellion, its governors secretly plotting to defect to foreign powers. Chandragupta, desperate to prevent a revolt, diverted troops and spies to the region. But when they arrived, they found nothing. No rebellion, no plot. It had been a carefully crafted illusion, and while the emperor's forces were distracted, a real foreign army invaded elsewhere, seizing a critical trade route. This was not a simple failure of intelligence. It was a masterstroke of counter-espionage, a shadow war fought entirely with lies. As the external threats mounted, Chanakya made a chilling discovery. The deepest wound came not from outside the empire, but from within. The Whisperers, the branch of spies responsible for psychological warfare, had begun acting independently. For years, they had manipulated enemies and allies alike, spreading rumors and controlling narratives. Now, they sought to control the empire itself. Their leader, a cunning operative known only by the codey name Naga, believed that Chandragupta and Chanakya were relics of a bygone era. The future, Naga declared, should belong to those who truly shaped reality, the masters of information. In secret, he built his own faction within the network, recruiting disillusioned agents with promises of power and freedom. When Chanakya confronted Naga, the encounter was chilling. "You taught us," Naga said, his voice calm, almost reverent. "You taught us that deception is power. That truth is merely a tool to be bent and reshaped." Did you really think we would not use your lessons against you? The Whisperers launched a coordinated strike, feeding false intelligence to every other branch of the Five Shadows. The hands of justice were sent chasing traitors who didn't exist. The Watchers were ordered to guard locations of no importance. Even the ghosts, Chanakya's most elite agents, were deceived and turned against one another. Within days, the entire network collapsed into chaos. It was the ultimate irony. A system built to control others had been outmanipulated by its own creation. Realizing that the empire was on the brink of destruction, Chanakya took drastic action. He summoned Chandragupta to a private audience, urging him to abandon the collapsing network and rule through open strength rather than hidden manipulation. But the emperor, long accustomed to his illusion of omnipotence, could not accept such a retreat. To admit that his spies had failed would be to admit that his power had always been a facade. The argument between the two men was fierce and final. Some accounts say that Chanakya, realizing his dream had become a nightmare, chose exile, vanishing into the wilderness. Others claim he was assassinated by the very agents he had trained, a victim of the paranoia he himself had sown. Whatever the truth, his departure marked the end of an era. Without his guiding hand, the network shattered completely. Chandragupta, isolated and mistrusted, was left to face the empire's enemies with only his armies. Though he achieved some victories, the magic of Mauryan invincibility was gone. The myth had been broken, and with it, the empire's foundation. The Mauryan Empire did not fall overnight. For years, it lingered, a shadow of its former glory. The Five Shadows were disbanded, their surviving members scattered. Some became mercenaries, selling their skills to foreign kings. Others faded into obscurity, their secrets buried with them. But even as the network dissolved, its influence continued to ripple across the ancient world. Foreign powers eagerly adopted the techniques Chanakya had pioneered. Code systems, compartmentalization, psychological warfare, these concepts spread like wildfire, shaping the intelligence agencies of future civilizations. Rome, Persia, and even distant China would eventually build spy networks that owed their existence to the lessons of the Mauryan experiment. And yet, the original vision was never truly replicated. Chanakya's network had been unique, not just in its scale, but in its philosophy. It was a system built on the belief that knowledge itself is power, that the fate of empires can be decided not on the battlefield, but in the shadows. Though the Mauryan Empire eventually fell, that idea would live on, resurfacing again and again throughout history. Centuries later, historians would puzzle over the Mauryan Empire's sudden decline. Many focused on external factors: wars, economic strain, political unrest. Few understood the true cause: a war fought entirely in secret, where the combatants were invisible and the weapons were lies. The surviving texts of the Arthashastra, Chanakya's legendary manual, provide tantalizing glimpses of this hidden world. In one passage he writes, "A king's power lies not in his armies, but in the eyes and ears that move unseen. The sword kills the body, but the whisper kills the soul." Modern readers might assume this is a poetic metaphor, but for those who lived under the Mauryan spies, it was literal truth. A single rumor, placed in the right ear, could topple a dynasty more effectively than any army. The story of the Mauryan spy network is not merely history, it is a warning. Every empire, ancient or modern, faces the same temptation: to trade transparency for control, to believe that secrets can be managed without consequence. But as Chanakya learned too late, secrecy is a double-edged blade. The same shadows that protect a ruler can one day rise to destroy him. Even today, modern intelligence agencies operate on principles first articulated by Chanakya thousands of years ago. They gather information, manipulate perception, and wage wars that never make the headlines. But the fall of the Mauryan network reminds us that no system, no matter how perfect, is immune to corruption. In the end, the greatest enemy is always within. And so, the tale of Chandragupta, Chanakya, and their invisible army comes to an end. What began as a dream of unity and strength ended in betrayal and ruin, a lesson written not in stone, but in shadows. As you've journeyed with us through this hidden chapter of history, take a moment to reflect. How many events in our own time are shaped by forces we never see? How many decisions are made by hands that never reveal themselves. The world may change, but the game of spies remains eternal. If this story has opened your eyes to the secret currents beneath history, like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to Ancient Spy Files so you don't miss the next hidden saga we uncover. And tell us in the comments below, which part of this story fascinated you the most, the rise of the network, its betrayal, or its lasting legacy? Your voice helps keep these forgotten tales alive. And remember, history is written by the victors, but it is rewritten by the spies.